First, the 2024 race and the rivalry between Trump and DeSantis heating up over the weekend. Here to break it all down with us, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, former Democratic Congressman Max Rose of New York, and former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania. Great to see all of you. Thank you. Vaughn, let me start with you because this seemed like a different Ron DeSantis this week, and one who's willing to be more aggressive going after Trump. Is this a sign of things to come, do you think?
He went to Sioux City. He went to Cedar Rapids, he went to Des Moines, and you just heard him. Well, he didn't say Donald Trump by name. He made the veiled shot that there is a culture of losing within the Republican Party. And for Ron DeSantis, what I continually heard over the course of this weekend from Iowa Republicans was, is he going to put in the work effort to try to unseat Donald Trump in Iowa? He enrolled out 1/3 of Iowa Republicans in the state legislature have endorsed Ron DeSantis. And he made campaign stops, retail stops, very much like Ted Cruz did back in 2016 when he beat Donald Trump in that Iowa caucus. Iowa Republicans said if he has any shot to unseat Donald Trump in Iowa, he's going to have to do exactly what he did here this weekend.
But he didn't say his name. So, Congressman Dent, can DeSantis run against Trump without taking him on head on?
Absolutely not, Anna. In my view, running a campaign, you have to draw a very sharp contrast. Running around and saying you're Trump light, that is, you agree with Trump's policies, but you don't have all the baggage. You're a culture warrior. He's going to find out that's not going to be a way to bring in all the non and never Trump voters who I think want somebody to take him on directly. Yeah, you just cannot beat a guy that way. In fact, when Donald Trump was indicted over the Stormy Daniels matter, DeSantis all but defended him. He's called it a witch hunt. But that's not the way you respond. You say this is another reason why the guy's unfit. He's just too big of a risk, but he's not doing that. He's not drawing a sharp enough contrast. All these other candidates must do the same thing as well.
I bet, Congressman Rose, your party would love to see a prolonged primary battle between DeSantis and Trump. But who do you think Joe Biden wants to run against?
Well, I think Joe Biden really wants to run against a MAGA, right, extremist Republican. And when you look at this field, that characterizes each and every one of them. But Donald Trump is skyrocketing in the polls right now. The Republican base, they're like that partner that wants to constantly go back to their toxic ex. It is horrible what's going on from the vantage point of being a patriotic American. Low expectations are unbelievable in politics. Ron DeSantis is at this stage right now where if he looks like a human being when he interacts with a voter, the media is saying, oh my God, look at this, he's soaring. The guy is plummeting in the polls and is clearly showing that he's not ready for prime time. So the Biden campaign is getting ready for a race against Trump. It's looking more and more likely. And my biggest fear about them, they cannot be too arrogant. They cannot underestimate the power of the MAGA base, and they've got to constantly make it clear to persuadables and independents how extraordinarily extreme that wing of the Republican Party is.
It does seem like the Republican candidates are trying to figure out how best to define themselves and who their base actually is at this point. Congressman Dent had the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today on Meet the Press yesterday, and he had this to say.
Is there any circumstance you could imagine supporting Donald Trump?
Well, I can't speak for all evangelicals. I can only speak for myself. And Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. I'll let my never be never.
Congressman Dent, does Donald Trump have any chance of retaking the White House if he's lost the evangelical base?
Well, I certainly think it would harm Trump significantly if the evangelicals turned on him. But I'm not so sure that they will. I think there's certainly a lot of discomfort among some evangelical leaders like Reverend Moore, who are alarmed how so many people have conflated God and Trump to the extent that that is really unhealthy, both for the church as well for the body politic. And so the evangelicals kind of put themselves in this predicament over the years by tying themselves so closely to the Republican Party on some of these social and moral issues like abortion and gay rights. And I think this is an enormous problem. But Trump is going to have a very difficult time winning a primary without evangelicals. But it still seems to me a large segment of the evangelical base still is supportive of.
Congressman Rose, you're former military, so let me ask you about this involving the disgraced former General Michael Flynn. Trump was apparently part of Flynn's Reawaken tour this weekend, and he signaled that if he gets reelected, he would bring Flynn back to the White House with him. Now, remind everybody here, Flynn is very much a conspiracy theorist. He was somebody encouraging Trump to invoke martial law in order to try to overturn the 2020 election. Your thoughts about this?
You know, it's so sad because for so many of, my generation of veterans who really grew up in global war on terrorism, the era of counterinsurgency, at one point, General Flynn was a pillar of that effort, someone that we look to as one of the great generals of this generation. And then he has, over the past decade, taken this horrific turn towards extremism, fascism, authoritarianism, and ultimately what is anti-patriotism, anti-constitutionalism. And the fact that Donald Trump is using him as a symbol for all that shows us something much larger about the Trump campaign. We've seen it in his town halls. We've seen it in his speeches. He is unforgiving. He will not step back, and he will never at any point step away from his base, who are fascist and anti-American. And that has got to be the central focus of any campaign against him. This is not a patriotic effort on their part.
But not all Trump voters are fascist and anti-American. So I don't want, people to hear you say that and not push back, right? I mean, if you are going to assume that the people who support Donald Trump are anti-American, then you're also alienating people who maybe don't love everything about what the Democratic Party's doing, but would be considering, maybe they're not sold on Trump, but they don't know if they want to vote for him.
No, of course not. There are so many supporters of Donald Trump and people who have chosen, with some degree of hesitancy and often regret to vote for Donald Trump, who are absolutely great Americans. But I'm talking about the Trump agenda and the Trump campaign, which I believe down to its core is not patriotic, is against the very fundamental values of this country, and is ultimately cowardly. And I think any campaign against that, his effort and his movement has to be one focused on those values. We can't talk about how much he is offensive, how ashamed we are to hear him. It has to be about the fact that this is an anti-American campaign that goes against our fundamental values, one of which is strength. And it is not strong to claim that you've never lost a campaign, that you very clearly did. It's not strong to stand up and admit your failures of the past. And he's not a strong person. And we have got to point that out.
Vaughn, I want to ask you about something we heard from Governor Chris Sununu this weekend with our Jen Psaki. Take a listen.
He really got behind really bad candidates that were extreme, that obviously couldn't win in November. If you can't win in November, then we shouldn't even be in the discussion, and he can't win.
You think the best argument is he's a loser?
Yes, because he can't win.
Vaughn, from your own experience covering Trump, talking to voters, is he somebody who is losing steam with the Republican Party, or is Sununu the outlier?
Right. To the congressman's point, right now in Iowa, Donald Trump has 80% approval rating among Iowa Republicans. And for Chris Sununu, he's not in this presidential race right now. Chris Sununu has seen the polls. Even in his home state of New Hampshire, he is polling below Donald Trump here. And there's a reality for the likes of Chris Sununu that, look, Larry Hogan didn't get into the race. He knew what he'd be up against. And this is where, when you're looking at the Republican Party's support, you hear Sununu saying that we've got to hit Donald Trump on the aspects of, like, bringing Michael Flynn back. Michael Flynn admitted guilt to lying to the FBI, to lying to Vice President Mike Pence. And yet, it's sort of the tit for tat. And if you're getting into a policy conversation with Donald Trump, time and again, I hear Republican voters justify voting for Donald Trump despite him being found liable for sexual abuse or for the myriad of other things that are controversial about him. They justify him because of the policies. So to Chris Sununu's point, getting into a policy debate with Donald Trump is a no-go because Republican voters appreciate the policy efforts he made well in the White House.
He's onto something. Sununu is running the campaign that Ron DeSantis should be running. The Republican base wants a fighter. They want someone who will go to war against the establishment, and they want someone who will go to war with anyone in their way, to include Donald Trump. And if you're unwilling to signal to that base that you are an unrelenting fighter, then you have no chance of winning them over. And I think Sununu understands that.
Got to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much, former Congressman Max Rose, former Congressman Charlie Dent, and Von Hilliard.